Okay, now it's time to get started on the other side of the part. As you can see, the only thing we have left to do on this end is this little undercut that's up here on the finished product. Also, we've already trimmed off our cap to go on, but we have to cut it down to this cap's length and clean up the end on another operation. So now we're going to concentrate from back here to here in reference to making this portion of the hammer handle. As you can see, working on this end of the hammer handle, we got 4.5 inches, which is from here to there, and then we got another inch, which is from there to there. So 4.5 plus another inch is 5.5. From there to there are the finished product. But we're going to have to stick out the chuck a little way, so let's add another inch to it. So the chuck will actually clamp on right about here. So we're going to have this hammer handle stick out 6.5 inches from the chuck down to this end. Now, when we go to put this in the chuck this way, we're going to be clamping on this knurled surface. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 3 aluminum shims. We have these in a plastic container on our tool cart, and we're going to clamp these around the 3-jaw chuck, 1 for each jaw, and they'll clamp like this to take and protect this knurled finish from our steel chuck jars, making a mess of that. Before we get started clamping on this knurled finish here, we're going to go ahead and finish off the end of this part and put a center in it. So we're going to slide that in, about a finger or 2 distance sticking out. It's nowhere fancy. Then we're going to sit there and snug that up good and tight and go ahead and face off the end of this part. Now when we face off the end of this part, we're going to use a tool that looks just like this. We're going to raise this up to where our cam is up. We're going to drop this in place, then snug it up like so. We're going to come on over here up to our work, and we're going to go ahead and face the work off. I went ahead and put a little blue Sharpie mark on there so we can see where we're at as far as our center goes. It looks like we're just a little bit below center, so we'll raise this up just a skosh, a little bit. And we may raise it up just a little bit more. Okay? Third time's a charm. That looks good. Okay? Now, we're going to take and go in just a little bit in that direction. And then we're going to take and feed this in nice and slow just to finish that off. We may feed in a little faster on the going in because, like I said, our best finish seems to be when we're coming back out. So we're going to come in to there, and you can see that looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and go in just a little bit deeper there and very slowly retract this on out and finish that off and make that nice and smooth and give that a nice finish on the outside. Looking pretty good there as it goes across. There. Now we got a nice finish. Now remember, we went from there out, so we're going to have a nice knife edge there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit that with our file. Always filing left-handed. Handle always goes in that hand. And we go ahead and knock the burr off that. Okay? Shut that off for the moment. We're going to now take our drill chuck out of the drawer, wipe off our tang, take our chuck key out, make sure we're clean in here. Take and crank this out about a finger's distance or so. Slam that in. If we're in right, we'll be able to pull on that. We're going to go ahead and put our center drill in. Bring this on down. Oh, just about that much is good on the center drill sticking out. Go ahead and tighten this up good and tight. Now we're ready to go ahead and center drill. Now we're going to go ahead and slide our tailstock up to where it's about that far up. We're going to go ahead and tighten up our tailstock in the lock position there. Okay, now we're ready to go with our center drill. Now, because it's critical how far we go in with our center drill, we want to go in too far. We want to go in to just almost to the top of this angle on here, because we're actually going to be riding our live center off of this one. So unlike when we're doing our drilled holes, where we have to take and be careful about how far we go, we're going to take and we can go in to about right about there and stop. That's perfect. Now, we're going to go ahead and bring this on out. I recommend all the students to put the bottom one in first. We try to close the chuck up so where there's just enough room to slide these in. Like I said, we're going to be shooting for 6.5 inches is how far we're going to be sticking out. So somewhere right generally in that vicinity right there is going to be good enough. So I've got the bottom one in place. I'll slide this one in on this side here. Okay, and then we'll put our third one in over here. If there's not enough room, we'll have to open up the lathe chuck a little more to go ahead and slide this one in. And now all three of them are in place, okay? So now we can go ahead and tighten our lathe chuck back up. We got it sticking out approximately 6.5 inches. We're going to make this good and snug. We're going to go ahead and bring our tailstock up till it touches about a finger distance in here. We're going to tighten up underneath on our nut on our tailstock, and then give a snug on our thing to make sure that's nice and tight and not spinning. I've been rubbing around on there, so a lot of our, let's give this a spin, make sure we're clear. And I want to make sure that that's got some Dykem on it, or magic mark or Sharpie mark, so we can see that spinning. Okay? Now, we're ready to go. What I was saying earlier was we have to now put this finished diameter here of a 1/2 inch from this point here up to that point there. So 4.5 plus an inch is 5.5 inches. So we're going to set our machine and put a witness mark at the 5.5 inch spot right there. So we'll touch the end of our cutter to the end of this part and determine 5.5 inches up. Now, in order to do that, what we're going to do is come in like this with our tooling. We're going to touch the very tip of this to the very end of that and bring that up till it touches. Once that touches, we're going to come down here and we're going to set a 0 setting. You can see I've already done it there. As we have pressure on the handle in this direction, holding pressure on the handle, we can move this around and we can set this on 0. Now, when we come up to touch our part, you can see it's on 0 there. Now, for every crank of this handle is an inch, so I'm going to go ahead and do the cranks. One full crank to 0 is 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, 5 inch, and a half there. So we moved 5.5 inches from here up to this point up there. Now, we're going to go ahead and turn our machine on, and we're going to go ahead and put a witness mark in right there. So I'm just going to run our tooling in till it touches and cuts, and that's going to tell us where to stop. So right there where our witness mark is, we just put in. That witness mark shows us that's where we stop at 5.5 inches. Now, we're going to go ahead and turn on our machine. We're going to come in till we touch, okay? We're going to take and make a 0 for that right there. And we're going to go in 10, which is 20, 15, which is 30, and we're going to re-0 this up here. Then we're going to go ahead and engage our feed. Now our feed is going. We're going to increase our feed a little bit to another notch, increase our feed rate, because this is the roughing cuts. And we're going to take and continue our cuts from this portion all the way down to about to where we left off at our witness mark for 5.5 inches. Like I've told you in the past, never grab a hold of those chips. Those chips will cut you. That's bad juju. If you want the chip to break off, you just stop the feed and they'll break right off. So every time you stop the feed, they just break right off. Okay? We could set the speed and feed to be just so perfect that the chips would curl into themselves and break off, but what's more important is to learning how to run the machine on the passes. Now we see that's done. We can stop our feed, shut off our machine. We just got done with our first pass, and as you can see here, I re-zeroed the machine as far as where it's at on the dial. So we're right where we left off at 0. This 0 here indicates where we just left off on that pass, and we're going to go ahead and measure the diameter now and see how much more we got to go. I've zeroed out our digital calipers, and we're going to go ahead and take and put our calipers on and measure. Looks like we have 715 thousandths is where we're at presently. At 715 thousandths and 500 from that leaves us 215 thousandths more to come off for finish for that half-inch dimension. Again, the tolerance block calls out here at the bottom. The tolerance block calls out here in a three-place dimension, plus or minus 10 thousandths. I'm going to go ahead and take off another 10 makes 20, 20 makes 40, of that 250 to go. We're going to take off another 40 thousandths. We're making sure that this is spinning back here, that we're not pushing in. And throughout these passes, I'm going to probably speed up the camera so we can see where we left off. Now, I've made some changes in the angle of the cutter, and I've made some adjustments, and you can see that the finish that's starting to come off of there is much better than the finish that was there. It's just a matter of tweaking it in as far as how we set the cutter in reference to the work itself. On these lighter machines, the way we set this cutter, it can have an influence on the rigidity of this component up here and give us a better or good finish or a bad finish. Now, as we zoom in on our work, we can see that that part's revolving. But remember what I told you, got to keep track of this. See this part here? It's not revolving at all. So that's bad juju. This part here down here is not supported if that's not turning. So we're going to come down here and tighten that back up to make that revolve, and that'll in turn make our finish much better here. I went ahead and took another cut or so off camera to get it down a little closer. Now this is the very finished cut. I've cut down on amount taken off, which is minimal, which would put us right in tolerance on the diameter. And I slowed the feed down slower in this direction, so we're not going quite as fast. And if you can see, the finish will be better as we get done. As soon as this pass is finished, I'll show you a close-up of what it looks like. As you can see, the finish is much better than what it was before, and much better. The roughing cuts, it does not matter what the finish looks like. What matters is what it looks like on the finished pass, which is what we're doing now. And you can see the finish is very nice through here as far as the quality of how it came out. I'm quite certain that we're well within tolerance, but we're going to go ahead and check it as soon as this pass is finished. When we get down to this point here, very close, we're going to shut off the feed and finish that going at it by hand in that direction to give it a nice clean look across there. As it's getting close, we'll go ahead and kill the feed rate. We'll take and bring it on up by hand manually. I'm going to put a little bit of Sharpie in there just to see what's going on. As I bring it up, get the chips out of the way. As I bring it up, I can see what I'm doing. And then bring it on out. Give us a nice edge. We zeroed out our calibers. Go ahead and go ahead and put them on there. And you can see we're right at about 500, 501 on the diameter, which is just where we want to be. All is good. As you can see, we got this established all the way from this end here to this point here, 1/2 inch in diameter and right in tolerance. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and touch the edge of this with our grooving or parting tool. We're going to come up 1 inch and we're going to plunge that groove in there, holding 300 thousandths in diameter, plus or minus 10, 3-place decimal. We're going to go ahead and drop our grooving tool in here, put it in place. We're going to go ahead and snug it up on here. I can tell that it's not perpendicular to the work. So what we're going to go ahead and do is loosen it up here, okay, where this can swivel, run it up against the chuck here, line it up perpendicular to the chuck, and then snug it back up. Then we're going to come down here and pick up the end of our work so we can move accordingly. We're going to go ahead and back our center away to give us a little extra room. We're going to come in here with the parting tool, and we're going to go ahead and touch the side of this to the end of that. So as we come in here very gently, we're going to touch the side of that. We're going to zero our knob down on our carriage wheel. Bring our tooling back out. Bring our center back in, snug it up, and we're going to go down here on our knob. We're going to go 1 full turn, or 1 inch, all the way around, up to 0. Now, remember, if we go past, we can't come back to it like this. We got to come back here for the backlash and get back up, because they're slopping the handle, and then come back on up to our 0. And that's where that groove is going to go. Right there. When I measure the diameter, it's about 490. 490 from the 300 we're shooting for gives us 190 more to go. Remember that each mark on a dial takes off 2 thousandths. I went ahead and measured it. It looks like it's 394. We got about 94 left to go on our dial. We're at 0, 10, 20, 40, 60, 80, about 84 is what I took off. Say about almost 90. Right, we're going to check our diameter. I checked our diameter. We're right about a 304 thousandths, which puts us right in tolerance, just a tad on the high side. Now that we have our groove here established, we're going to go ahead and turn this diameter for the threads. We're going to turn that diameter down between 365 as a low to 370 as a high on the diameter. We'll go ahead and put our tooling in, lock it in place, turn our machine on, come up here till we touch. Okay? We're going to go ahead, 10 makes 20, 20 makes 40. And we're going to take about 40 thousandths off the diameter. Now, the finish is between 365 and 370. I took a couple more passes off camera, and what I've determined is we're at 391 now. We're headed for 370, which is the high, so 21 thousandths or so is more to go. I've re-zeroed my dial here, and we have about 21 thousandths more to go. Now each mark takes off double, like I keep telling you, so 10 makes 20. That would get us pretty close. So we're going to take about, say about 22, let's see, 22, about 24 thousandths off. And we're going to re-zero it here so we know where we left off. Turn on our machine. This should be our finished pass. As you can see, we're right around 369 on the diameter, 370 is the high, so we're going to call that good enough. We're going to go ahead, and while we got it over here, we're going to deburr the end of this and put a chamfer on there for the threads. So I spun the chuck to make sure it'll turn. We're going to go ahead and turn it on. We're going to file left-handed. Put a nice chamfer on there, on the end. Like I said earlier, we're at 379 on the diameter, so now we got to put these threads on. These threads are 3/8, 24 threads, and that's put on with a button die. And here we go, we have our button die out here, and we've looked for the writing on it. It says 3/8, 24. I'm going to go ahead and kind of move it to make sure you can see what it says. Okay, now one side has got, like we talked before, more lead on it than the other side. Some of the button dies are set up for 3/8 16, some are 3/8 24. This is the 3/8 24. Okay, this is a lot like we did before. We have to keep this chuck from turning, or otherwise when we try to put the threads on, this is going to go round and round. So we'll bring this on up so that doesn't turn. We're going to go ahead and take our live center out, pop it out like so. Then we're going to take and put a little bit of cutting oil on the part itself. We're going to put the appropriate side sticking out. We're going to put the other side up against our tailstock. We're going to push on our tailstock as we get this started. We want to get it started 2 or 3 turns to get it started nice and straight. Now once we got it started straight, then we can take and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth all the way up. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, beautiful threads. We're going to take our parting tool and bring it in nice and close, and then we're going to come over here and bring it up till it just barely touches like so. Okay? Then we've taken our indicator and we brought it down and turned on our magnet, and now we're going to adjust it to the 0 reading here. Now we're going to bring our cutter back away from our work, okay, and then we're going to bring this up 308. 100, 200, 300, and 8 more. It's always better to be a couple more than a couple less. Okay, so let's go about 309, 310. Now that's how far we're up. Now, what we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and put some Sharpie ink on there. So we'll come up here, then we'll put a little Sharpie ink on there. And what we're trying to do is we're going to make another witness mark. Always making witness marks all over. What we've done is we're going to come in a ways, and I'm just going to eyeball this. What I usually tell the students is, Let me determine how deep we need to go so we don't undercut it. But what we've done is we've established this collar on the end of the hammer handle. We're going to turn this diameter down on a taper, and this I've left it bigger than what it's going to finish at, but I've established how thick this should be. So we just turn this on down till we get to this thickness. That's the reason why I left an extra thousandth or two to work with in case we just bump it a little bit. Now, the next operation we're going to do on this project is we're going to turn this 1 degree taper from here to there. We're going to do this by swinging the compound rest on 1 degree, and then we'll have to do this in 2 different stages. We'll have to do it from there to about there, then from there to the finish down at the other end. We don't have enough travel in our compound rest to do it all at once, nor do we have a taper attachment. But we can do a really nice job of this hammer handle by just doing it in 2 different movements, you might say. Okay? So it's a 1 degree on the taper. Now there's 2 screws that loosen this compound rest where we can spin it. This would be one, and there's one on the opposite side as well. Now, this would be 0 or 90, okay? And over here is where the mark is, and what we have is we have magnifying glasses, such as this one, for the students to use so they can see to set that 1 degree. So I'm going to go ahead and set that 1 degree. Now that's 1 degree off of the 90. So, you know, what we just have is one little mark going in that direction, okay, for that taper. So I'm going to bring this back around, and I'm going to set this on the taper because you can't really see it with the film, with the camera, on one little mark going that way. Now on this particular operation, we're going to use a tool that's got the tool bit on this side here, the insert, so that we can cut in this direction from away from the headstock towards the tailstock. We're going to go ahead and drop this in, okay, and then we're going to take and bring this on around and put it right about there. We're going to have to adjust our height out where the height is correct, and then we're going to crank our compound rest all the way till it can't go any further in this direction. So what I've done is I've moved it up as far as it could go. I'm going to adjust the height, then we'll go back on camera. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. We're going to start from here in the middle, and we're going to go down towards this end here to try to just clear out some of the extra material we have. Because we can't do this all at once or all in one pass. So we're just going to vary. These are the roughing passes now, so I can kind of smooth along a little bit at a pretty good clip, taking these off, as far as taking and removing some material. So as this goes down, it's going to take a little more as it goes along. So as it gets further and further down, the chip's going to get a little bigger and bigger, taking that 1 degree off. Now, with all the students, they're real susceptible to whatever the compound is. A lot of these compounds are not exactly perfect on the 1 degree, but they hit pretty darn close. So that was a roughing pass. Now just to get it pretty close, just to get some material off. Now I'm just going to run it back up. Doesn't matter that it's cutting as it goes. And we're going to hit again, we're going to hit at the thing. So we're going to run it in just a little bit further now and take a little bit more material off. And then we're going to start from the other end and take and work from our way down. So we're just kind of roughing it down a little bit, getting some of the material out of the way. There we go. Now, that was just a roughing pass to get some of the material moved. Now we're going to crank this all the way back up to its extreme where we left off. And what I usually tell students is that we don't want to start all the way up at the edge up here. We want to start actually somewhere right about through here somewhere. That's a good place to start when we come on down. So we'll bring it in, and we'll just bring it in till it scratches, just so it scratches the Sharpie mark on there, like so. And then what we'll do is we'll slowly be bringing this on down like so. Now, what I usually tell the students is the slower they crank this knob, the happier they're going to be in reference to what's going on. Because what you want to do is you want to really move this kind of slowly down the part, and the slower you move it, the nicer the finish is. If we do the roughing cuts, it'll look like this on the finish, But if we sit there and be consistent in how we're cranking this handle, what it'll do is it'll look very nice, just like it does up there. It'll give a real nice finish. And we don't want to really stop anywhere along the way, because as we stop, it's going to dig in a little bit. So we want to be very consistent about our movement and how we do this. I remember that one of the episodes on one of the films I had you guys watch, the Old Tony or whatever his name was using a pistol drill or a cordless drill on this, using it for the power feed. But we have the students go old school. They got to do it by hand and have a steady hand, kind of like I do. I expect them to do a nice, smooth, and steady finish on it, just like this. And like I said, it starts to cut bigger chips as it goes along, but we whittle down a little bit of the meat up there in front, so it's not going to be too bad. And we're going to go ahead and take this so this totally runs out of travel, and then we're going to go ahead and redo it and get a new bite. Moving along. The working at the railroad. Oh, then we run out of travel. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to come out away from the work, and we're going to crank this back up to where we started in reference to being down at this end so we can get some feed. Now what we're going to do is we're going to crank our carriage down here, so that way we can do from this place here, we can do from here down to there and finish up our part on our taper. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some more Sharpie mark on there right here so we know where we left off. So as soon as we touch, we're in good. We're going to put some Sharpie mark down here too as well so we can see what's going on. Now I'm going to go ahead and adjust the camera, I think, to a different angle. Now I'm going to bring the cutter on back in till it just barely scratches that surface that we left off on. So I'm watching for the Sharpie mark to sort of disappear or change, making sure the backlash is out. There we go. We just started to pick it up. Okay, now we're going to bring this on down and pick up this as we go. We're doing it nice and steady and slow as we go along. I'm going to have to scoot the camera back a little so I don't run into something. The secret is just how steady you can crank the handle for the better finish. Now we're going to be coming up on a shoulder here. Our angle was just a shade off, so we're going to go ahead and make another pass. Come up here till we just scratch. Nice and slow. Okay. We're going to bring this on down. Working it steady as we go. Like I said, the key is in how slow you crank the handle. You know, I know that you're watching on camera, so I may have to rapid travel a little bit through this. We'll see. Taking and feeding this along. this off. Put a little Sharpie on there where we can see where we left off. Crank this really fast back up to where we were before. I'm going to adjust the tooling a little, shut the machine off. I'm going to adjust the tooling just a little this way. Just a skosh, a little bit. Father-in-law used to say a skoshi. I think that was a little bit in Japanese. Not really sure. Chinese. One of them languages. Anyway. Okay. Now, I'm going to come in. I'm going to take my white piece of paper. White piece of paper. Look down from the top. Give me a better idea how close I am so I can just barely touch that. Okay. Just barely touched it. Come over and just barely touch it again. Okay, now we're going to bring that on down. Nice and close. Okay? Here's the finished product when we got done with the turning operation. We're also going to take a file and touch the corners here and here to deburr this on the outside. And then we're going to do a filing operation across the face of this and then a polishing operation after that. Now about files. This here is the file card or file brush they call it. Rough teeth on one side, brush on the other. We want to brush out our file and get our file as clean as possible. Through the next operation, this is very important. You want to go with the grain of the file. The file's got grain in it. It goes at an angle, and that's the way you wish to brush. I actually worked with a professional filer. I may have mentioned that several years. That's what he did for a living for a while. You don't want to touch your hands on your file across here, nor do you want to sit there and get oil on your brush. What I usually tell students is I'll take a Sharpie and I'll go like this and put it all up and down the part like that. And then what I'll tell them is they're done filing when all that is gone. So I tell them, you always got to file left-handed. The file handle always 100% of the time goes in your left hand. And then you lay it on there flat and you just work your file down your part. Okay? You can tell when you're doing good is when you turn it over and all the debris is in the center of that file. And what you do is once that's loaded up, it can't get any more. And if you try to file without cleaning that, the debris itself will actually scratch your work. So what you want to do is you want to take and work your file down to try to get rid of, almost bumped it there, try to get rid of all the debris that's in your file, and take and do it again and again, and just work that file till you're working all that Sharpie mark off of there. Okay, now you keep your file clean. Okay. Now, if you don't hold it flat on there, it'll be obvious when you turn the file over because all that debris will be on one corner of the file instead of all down it. So you just keep on working that file. I'm working out the blend of this up here on the taper. At the same time, I'm getting rid of the little mismatch area there and working this out down below. You think I would be taking off a lot, but what I'm taking off is just a few thousandths of an inch is all I'm taking off. I'm actually putting a little bit of pressure on there, more than what I like a student to. This time thing usually takes about 15 or 20 minutes to do this particular operation. I'm trying to get it done in a lot less time. Okay, now I'm going to put teeny chamfers on each side of there. Little chamfer on there, little chamfer on there. Okay? Keep my file clean. Okay, we're just about done with the filing part of it. We'll go a little bit more up here. Okay, looks good. Looks good. This little touch on there. Not much. Looks good. Okay. Now we're finished with the filing. Okay. We use 600 and 1,000. This is all you need to make this look beautiful. I had complaints over the years that they should have more, but this is actually the perfect amount to do the best job you can on there. Okay? So we're going to go with the 600 first. I'm going to run the machine in reverse. Okay? The reason for that is I can hold it down here and I can push on it up here. Okay? So if something goes wrong, okay, it's pulling it away from me. If I were to run the machine, wait for the click, if I were to run the machine forward, every time I try to do this with this, it would just go like that on me. So what I'd tell the students is just put the machine in reverse, like so, and then they can take and run their emery cloth down. Now I think this is the best way I found to do it. They can do it whatever way they want, but I don't want them to rub like this. If they rub like this, it'll just fog it all up and not polish it. It'll make it look yucky. Grab the hold of it all the way around. Okay. Polish our knob there a little bit. Okay, now that's all I've used of that. Now this is the 1,000, okay, and I'm going to finish up with the 1,000. Now, because I did a nice job of filing, and I did a nice job of turning, and filing I should say, this is actually coming out very nice with minimal amount of emery cloth used. Okay. Voila, finished. Now this is the hammer we're done with, but we got to go ahead and catch up one little thing we have on the other side. So I'm going to loosen this, I'm going to pull out my hammerhead, I'm going to spin it 180, and I'm going to put it right back in where it came out, leaving it stick out about a finger distance or so. Now, snug that up. We're ready to put on that little notch that's on the other side. We still got our aluminum shims in there protecting things. Now, it's time for us to put in this 60 typical. Typical always means both ways. So when it says typical like this, it means 60 that way plus 60 deep. Okay? Now, only one student over the probably just under 1,000 students that I've had the privilege of being with have caught me on this as to what is wrong with what we're doing here that's incorrect. Let's see if you can catch that. That'll be one of the questions on what am I misleading you on by this. Now, we're going to touch the side of this cutter to the edge of this part, like so. So we're going to run it up. I put some white paper behind it because it's a whole lot easier to see with white paper back there in reference to when we're getting close. Now when we touch that to that, just like this, okay? Just like that, okay? I'm going to go ahead then too and zero this dial here, down below. So we're going to go ahead and zero this dial down here, okay? So when I come up and touch, this is going to be 0. Now, each one of these marks are 20 thousandths. So we're going to crank out our table here, okay? We're going to move up 20, 40, 60 thousandths, okay? Now, we're going to come in here, up above, until we get close to our work, and we're going to turn the machine on. We're going to touch. Once we touch, we're going to come down to here, loosen this up, adjust this to 0, and then we're going to go 10 makes 20, 40, 60. Now, back up here, this cutter is not made to cut sideways. Now we're going to go in that direction very, very slowly till we come off the work. And that seems to give us a really nice square-cornered little undercut for our cap. Now, we did raise a burr out on this edge. So we got to take the file then, file left-handed, like we always do, and just give a little touch to right there as far as the chamfer goes, and perfect. Our hammer handle is done and ready for inspection. There's our finished hammer handle, all ready for inspection. I think we did a really fine job, don't you?